Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Steve Richards, columnist and broadcaster, and Salma Shah, broadcaster and former government special advisor. Great to see you both. Hello to you. As ever, though, we will turn our attention to the front pages. First of all, The Guardian, going with new data about the effectiveness of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, which challenges some of the scepticism in other countries about using it. The Eye reporting that a single shot of either of the vaccines currently available here cuts the risk of serious illness by 80%. There we go, vaccines cut the risk of serious illness. It is the same story for the Daily Express. One jab brings dramatic drop in hospital cases, their headline. While the Telegraph says that fewer than 10 COVID patients over 80 are going to intensive care each day now. The Metro reports on renewed fears for the health of the Duke of Edinburgh after he was transferred to another hospital for specialist heart care. And prayers for Philip is the headline in the Daily Mirror as it reports that the royal mood has shifted over the Duke's health. The Daily Mail claims an exclusive with news of what's described as Boris Johnson's secret fund to pay for a costly makeover of number 10 Downing Street by his fiancée Carrie Simons. The Star reports that the footballer Cristiano Ronaldo is banned from doing any chores by his partner in case he injures himself. While the Financial Times leads with the Chancellor's budget plans to help the City of London compete with its foreign rivals. So Steve Richards, Salma Shah are here. That's where we start, Salma, isn't it? The Financial Times, looking ahead to the budget. What's the take then for the FT?
Well, the FT is quite interesting because it's been talking about how it's going to have this competitive new listing regime for these companies that are going to come in and be incredibly innovative in terms of the technology. Now, that is a good classic FT story, but it doesn't really tell you about the...
Oh, apologies, Salma, you've momentarily frozen. Still frozen. Steve, take up the story if you... Oh, no, there she is. You're back again. Salma, carry on if you can.
Yes.
No, I think we might redial that one. Apologies, Steve. Let's move to you then. I think Salma was about to say it doesn't say something about something. Oh, no, she's back again. Salma, hello? No, don't. Oh, no, she's completely gone. I'm sorry, Steve. Yes, yeah, carry on, Steve. Tell us a bit more about the FT story.
Well, it highlights one of the many challenges Rishi Sunak is having to face in this budget context, which is quite extraordinary, the pandemic and Brexit. And the FT is one of the few papers that continues to focus on the consequences of the Brexit deal negotiated finally on Christmas Eve of last year. And of course, one of the consequences is that it was a deal for goods rather than services, and financial services is a big part of the British economy. So Rishi Sunak will be looking at ways of boosting the City of London and the financial sector in that context, given the fact that Amsterdam and Frankfurt and others are saying, right, OK, you didn't prioritise this sector. We're going to move in and take some of that sector away from you. So that's part of what he'll be doing in the budget. It won't be the main part, but you can see why a paper like the FT focuses on it.
Indeed so. And all of that is about generating income, which, as we all know, the city does contribute to, because rock and hard place springs to mind, does it not? Huge overspend by the Treasury, as you might expect during a pandemic, but not the time to raise income. Is that the theory? Let's move on to the Telegraph, shall we? Which is William Hague telling the Tories to prepare for tax rises. It's not if but when moment, isn't it? But is the general feeling that now is not the time?
Well, it depends who you speak to. There is a powerful argument for saying that this is still the equivalent of a wartime situation. And in such a context, you don't raise taxes. I think we're going to come on to the Labour position shortly. But what's interesting about the Hague piece telling Tories to prepare for tax rises is that it's very difficult these days for a Tory chancellor to win parliamentary approval in his own or her own party for tax rises. Philip Hammond put forward a tax rise. This was, of course, pre-pandemic in the ancient history period. It was defeated, or it was clear that it was going to be defeated. Some of George Osborne's proposed tax rises were defeated by revolts, and there is an indication anyway that there is a degree of opposition within the current parliamentary party, now with a much bigger majority, to tax rises in this budget. There's a curious alliance with the Labour leadership that also believes, for different reasons, now is not the time for tax rises. But clearly, Rishi Sunak and others, given the briefings that have come to the Sunday papers and others, are preparing for tax rises. Whether they will be implemented immediately or preparation is laid out for tax rises in the months to come, we will have to wait for Wednesday. But tax rises will be part of Sunak's chosen route through the economic timetable out of the pandemic. And this will be an interesting test for a Tory parliamentary party that has quite often shown itself to be deeply sceptical about tax rises, almost as a matter of principle.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Because many of the papers are still focusing on the giveaway elements of what the budget will hold. The Sun earlier talking about fuel duty will be frozen again. The Telegraph talking here about the Chancellor wanting to help 130,000 small businesses, including a Help to Grow scheme, which would be £5,000 for businesses to buy new software, for example, to improve their online operations. So there's still a giveaway element of it, so we're still spending money, which takes us to The Guardian and this strange position where Labour is backing a rise in business tax eventually, but not now. Salma, what have they said?
So I think this is really part of the Labour move to try and become the party of business again and reassure people that the Jeremy Corbyn period is over. And Annalise Dodds has certainly talked about, exactly as you say, as The Guardian is reporting, that they are now looking at tax rises longer in the future because they feel that this is a risky time for the economy and don't want to do anything, especially post-pandemic, for the economy and the recovery to suffer. I think.
Yeah, carry on.
I was going to say, what I think is really interesting about this is that actually the last election, 2019 and post-Brexit, has completely changed the electoral map. And what we're now seeing is the political consequence of that, where you're actually being Conservative MPs asking for a bigger state, which, as I think I just heard Steve talking about, is pretty unprecedented, and the Labour Party sort of thinking about how it's going to push its market credentials. So this is going to be a really interesting budget from a political perspective, definitely.
And this was always the question, wasn't it, after election night? You know, did those parts of the North lend the Tories their vote for one specific point? And can the Tories keep hold of them? So they've always got that in the back of their mind, haven't they? Which takes us to the Star in Sheffield. Levelling Up has achieved nothing so far. And this is an MP suggesting the big North-South differences remain unchanged and long-term efforts are needed. Once again, is that something that Rishi Sunak will have an eye on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Rishi is going to have an eye on the levelling up agenda, but mostly because it actually hasn't been defined by any particular policy. So there is a golden opportunity here in the budget for him to be able to define what levelling up actually means. But as you can see from the Sheffield Star, and I think there's also the Yorkshire Post there is a massive amount of scepticism, particularly not just from the Labour MPs in and around the area, but also from the media outlets and civic groups, because there is a sense that we've heard this all before. And, you know, the levelling up agenda, its precursor were things like the Northern Powerhouse under George Osborne. So, you know, it is going to require some money, and it doesn't feel like there is something significant coming in the budget towards that particularly.
And just a final thought back to the Daily Telegraph, in fact, William Hague suggesting that Conservatives need to prepare themselves for tax increases, both personal and business. What should we be expecting ultimately, do you think? What will the Tories go for? More income tax? Corporation tax obviously been mooted quite a lot as well. Where would you level these taxes at then? Oh, I think we might must Salma as well.
I think corporation
Do you know, I blame the meteor, to be fair. We're going to take a break. We've got so much to pack in the next half of our programme. We'll get the very latest on COVID, the vaccines and the variants, and also the latest too on those renewed fears for the health of the Duke of Edinburgh on the front page of the Metro and elsewhere. Back in just a moment.
Our job is to tell the truth.
This is a forgotten front line. They are dying here.
Here it comes. Cut.
Boy, have we got some interesting ways of showing you what's going on.
Their message to us, get ready.
Nothing like apocalypse.
Instructing you to stay at home.
I can't believe we did that.
It's pretty special, isn't it?
You learn quickly in China football that nothing can come as a surprise anymore. But what has happened has nothing to do with football. So in China, football is not grassroots or bottom up like it's normally is in Europe. It's a top-down affair. So big corporations like Suning, which is one of the biggest companies in China, they operate these clubs sort of at the goodwill of the government, of the local government. And what's happened is that the corporation has run into debt repayment problems, and they have to get rid of what they don't consider as core business, which football isn't. It's sort of like a mix of Walmart, Amazon, PayPal. They have cell phone operators, so it's a huge company that is now running into problems that has nothing to do with football, and this is what they've come up with. So I've actually heard from a couple of players, both sides, and it's come obviously as a shock. So most of them will be looking for new clubs. But what will probably happen is that, like normally in China, somebody else will take over the operations. But it's a shame with Suning because they've invested a lot in football in Jiangsu, and Jiangsu is actually a traditional Chinese football powerhouse. So they've actually run a pretty impressive ship. It was very professional to work for them, and a lot of professional people who were running the organization. So they had a huge youth program. They had one of the best funded women's teams in the world when I was over there, and they've actually won the title in 2019. So somebody else will take over, but it remains to be seen if they can continue at the same level of operations.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Salma Shah, and hopefully back soon, Steve Richards. We're having one of those nights, aren't we? Welcome to the world of Zoom and every other means of modern communication that we all know and love over the last year, Salma. Let's move on to COVID, shall we? And the really heartening news we had from the Downing Street News Conference about the efficacy of these vaccines, which all of us were desperate to hear.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So you've got fewer than 10 COVID patients now going into ICU, which is, I think, even better than had been expected in terms of the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So we are really seeing light at the end of the tunnel. But there are two things that I think are slightly difficult here. which are number one, that we have to keep an eye on the mutations. And, as we come out of lockdown, mutations, as people start moving around, are going to become more likely. And obviously, there is still this particular case of a Brazilian mutation that the government is trying to track down. And then also there is the EU dimension to it, where, previously we saw President Macron and German officials sort of doubting the ability of this particular vaccine. And I think now Matt Hancock is urging governments to start taking up the vaccine. I think partly because it's about making sure that our European neighbours are secure in terms of their vaccine programmes. But also perhaps a little bit of a "I told you so" as well from the UK government.
Absolutely. And also, if you're in discussions with the European Union for trips abroad in the summer, should it come to that, you want the EU to take up the vaccine. And it's been quite pitiful, hasn't it, in parts of France and Germany, for example. I see the French health minister tonight has said that over 65s can take it, but only up to the age of 74. And after that, if you're older than that, you still need to take the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines. Welcome back, Steve. It's one of those nights. It's one, isn't it? We're talking about the vaccination success, the eye as well. Vaccines cut the risk of serious illness by 80%. And just reflecting on the fact that possibly other parts of Europe may change their minds on the efficacy of the AstraZeneca jab for older people.
I think that's inevitable. All the evidence suggests that the AstraZeneca vaccine is effective and is crucially effective on older people. So all that original feverish, panic-stricken furore about whether that would be the case in parts of Europe is just challenged by the evidence. So I think we are going to move past that phase quite quickly. What's so interesting is this is a cause for unqualified optimism, I think, and it will spread beyond the UK, well beyond the UK. But of course, at the same time, as ever with this saga, there's underlying causes for concern, such as the new variant, and that too is in the papers tomorrow. So you get, as has been often the case over the last week or so, stories which make you say, yeah, we're getting through this. And then just the hints of concern and worry about variants, how they get here in the UK and what they imply by getting here.
Yes, and, other worries like what happens post 35 days for the Pfizer vaccine, for example, given it's not being given as protocol dictated by the creators at BioNTech. Guardian 2, Hancock seizes on data to urge the EU to think again on the Oxford jab, so similar theme there. Let's just go, Salma, with a final thought on what's happening with the Duke of Edinburgh, making a number of the front pages as well, not least the Metro. Philip Hart fears, and obviously everybody wishing him well as he moves hospitals today.
Yes, indeed, wishing him well, but also obviously with a degree of concern, because obviously Palace Protocol dictates that sort of personal health details aren't really released. So all you really get are notes to tell you that.
Salma, honestly, I think you've gone again. I apologise. We're running out of time, but we're going to make it all lovely and brilliant for 11:30 when we see you back again. Salma and Steve, thank you both very much indeed.